Shakira.
Hi, Danny. It's nice to see you virtually.
So Kim's got her phone on, watching the stream, so we can answer questions. And of course, I don't have anything in my hand, so I won't be able to see your questions. But she'll read them off if you have anything as we go.
Good girl. Flex. Good girl.
And we're going to start with talking about what's going on here with the restrictions that are on all businesses right now in our area, and what we're doing.
Danny says we're too quiet. You need to talk louder.
She should turn her volume up.
Turn your volume up, Danny.
Turn it up. I'm not a pro live streamer, and so I have my my phone on the tripod, which is better than my normal live streaming, but it's still going to leave something to be desired, I'm sure. But we're learning as we go here. So wanted to give everybody a heads up about what's going on for classes. We had a week ago put out a post and emailed to everybody who's in classes right now that we have to suspend till we figure out what's going on. And things have not gotten better in terms of what businesses are being asked to do right now, and so that is ongoing at this point. The end of our 2-week pause would be next Friday, and we are going to of course reevaluate then. Hope everything lightens up by then, but if it does not, we may push out a week or two more. We don't love that, by the way.
No, we don't.
We want you guys in here. We want you guys making progress, and so what we're going to talk about today are some your questions, what's going on with you, and then just give you those kind of updates. So other than classes on pause, we still have private session spots available, and we feel very confident working outside that we can observe the sort of social distancing guidelines that are going to keep everybody safe. So if you want to come do a private, we can definitely accommodate that all week long, other than Sundays when we're closed.
Pause for just a moment. While Jason is talking, if you all want to start putting your questions into the chat bar, and I can start fielding those so
Awesome.
that we're ready for the next step in our live stream.
So you interrupted my train of thought, so now I got to get back on. We were talking about private sessions.
We also have virtual
We
sessions.
are also starting up, or actually have a special on something we've done for a while, but there's not a huge demand for it before this whole COVID-19 outbreak, whatever you want to call it. Before this, there hasn't been a huge demand for virtual sessions. We've done a few, but with this social distancing and people being asked to stay in their homes, we're definitely open to the idea of doing it more, and we've actually rolled out a special, which is a 50% off of the posted price on our website, that's a Facebook special that's through
the end of April.
The end of April is what we have that posted for. So if you want a virtual private, we can set that up through Zoom meeting or whatever virtual meeting service you have, that we can use pretty much all of them. So make it easy on anybody. Google Duo and Facebook Live are pretty easy, or Facebook Chat are pretty easy. So we've got that going on, and then we definitely have board and train slots available. If you guys are in a position where you're home more and you're noticing your dog needs work, we can also help with that. But that's what's up with us. We're all healthy. We're feeling good.
Dogs are doing great.
Dogs are doing great. We're having a lot more time to work on our own dogs and work on projects around here, like I'm painting the porch and some things like that. Just to be moving forward as we have to take some downtime, forced downtime, unfortunately. But we hope you guys are all doing good. Hope everybody's staying healthy. If you're not healthy, our hearts are with you, and we're all just trying to do our part to get our region through this right now. So, do we have any questions coming through?
Oh, we do. Our first question is from Ashley. She says, Bo is getting stronger and pulling hard when we are out on a walk. I don't like being walked around the neighborhood. So I asked her what tools she's using, and she's using a harness. Ashley, are you using a front clip or a rear clip harness? Does it clip between his front legs at his chest, or does it clip on his back?
Waiting for a response.
While we wait to hear back from Ashley, she had emailed me, and so I had a little bit of time to think about the pulling. And the number one thing that always stands out to me is tools and technique. We at Audax prefer not to use harnesses. Jason likes to joke that the Iditarod would be boring if harnesses stopped dogs from pulling. You do.
True.
We like to use harnesses to build pulling, to build our recall, to build forward movement when we're building protection dogs. We don't tend to use them in walking. If you want to start with the least invasive, minimally aversive tool, I normally start puppies on a nice flat collar. Bo is not really a puppy. Yes, he's a puppy, but he's not in a puppy body anymore. He's probably grown a lot since your puppy series. So a British slip lead would be an appropriate tool to progress to. One of the biggest things with technique, though, is making yourself a cedar tree or an oak tree. Plant your feet in the ground and do not move. If he hits the end of that leash and he thinks he's going to move you. So often, I'm going to demonstrate. So often we see people and the dog is in front and the dog is pulling and they jerk with the dog and they jerk with the dog, and the dog is learning that by putting pressure on the leash they move us. And as long as we do that, no matter what equipment you use, you could be using aversives like a prong collar or an e-collar, and your dog is going to learn to pull through that no matter what. So we need to plant our feet in the ground and not move and not give when they start to pull.
So there's a lot to that. That is something that a lot of people struggle with. There's a couple different exercises that you can work on that are positive. Everything Kim said was absolutely right. By the way, I'm not contradicting her in the slightest.
There's a lot of different ways that we work on it and build it.
There are a lot of ways that we work on that exact issue, and one of them doesn't require any special equipment. You could work with the harness and do this. You could work with a flat collar or any other connection to your dog. And what we think of when we think of this is a food-based exercise. Okay, so it's calm, it's easy. We take the leash attached to the dog, we give a little tug, and especially if there's something that they're facing away looking at, we give them a little pressure, and if they'll resist that pressure, this exercise actually works a little better. When they resist, we pull through that resistance, get them to move towards us, and if they look at us as we do that, and they move towards us with that pulling, we mark yes, and we give our food reward. And we'll just repeat this. What we're trying to do there is reprogram our dog's understanding of what the leash pressure means. No, Shakira,
Got her.
Reprogram our dog's understanding of what the leash pressure means
9.
into them understanding that they should go with the pressure and come towards us. We like to do this in all 4 of the cardinal directions. So forward, straight, reverse, along the dog's spine, left and right. And then once we have those accomplished, where we can give a little tug, dog comes to us and gets the reward, we'll start to bring in a little bit of upward pressure. I'm not talking about correcting your dog into a sit, but a little bit of upward pressure to help them to understand that that should mean sit, and a little bit of downward pressure that should help them to understand that means down. We want to work on our down and our sit inducively with food reward before we ever introduce that pressure version. We want them to understand those are behaviors that are valuable to us through that food reward process. And once we have those things established with a little bit of pressure as well, we can put our verbal cue back in there on the up and down and have our sit and our down with just a little bit of leash help understood. Now, we'll also, when we work our dogs through the sit and down process, we'll add a little bit of leash pressure in that process too. You don't have to, if you haven't done that, you can definitely go back and do it. But that's a worthwhile way to help fade some of your luring too, is use just a little bit of leash. Doesn't have to be correction, just a little bit of leash pressure to help your dog move without the need for the food to be precursor
It's really
to the
just
behavior.
like a gentle.
Yeah, just a gentle push to get them into the behavior. And that's one of the ways that we work on fading away, luring the dog with food, is we kind of show them what we want them to do with a little bit of pressure, but they need to understand to give to it. Okay, do we have any other questions going on?
That's all I've got so far.
That's all we got so far. Okay. So let's talk about, we've just talked about a fairly detailed description of an exercise you can do with the leash for leash pressure. And let's talk about the specifics to walking. So that was a very precursory sort of an approach for your dog to understand the leash pressure. What I find when I'm doing leash walking with the dog and I want them to understand to move with the leash, a couple things need to happen. One, I need to be giving my dog the right message through the leash, and if they're leaning into it and moving me towards the direction they're leaning, I'm going to give them the message, just like him said, that I'm going to be following right behind them. So the equipment that you attach to your dog is going to have a lot to do with how that information transmits to them, whether it takes a whole bunch of force, and you can hurt a dog on a flat collar. Okay, if they're yanking you one way and you're trying to go the other way, and you're putting all that pressure on their neck with physical effort, that's all being amplified right through their cervical vertebrae. It's not good for them. Okay, the same is actually true on the harnesses. We read a veterinary study not that long ago with the front clip harnesses where because they're cutting across the bicep of the dog, the pull goes one way and they start to favor that front leg because it's making their bicep uncomfortable. And then what starts to happen is they don't put weight on it, and they also unevenly weight their rear legs. And then when you take the harness off of them, they still do it. So and they've tried, studying different things with rotating which direction they're having the dog walk on. They'll always develop an imbalance in their front end from that bicep strap on a front clip leash or a front clip harness. So what tends to be, we're outside and we got bugs. What tends to be the go-to tool that requires the least amount of force and the least amount of physical effort from your end, but the least amount of force determined by how the dog perceives it, is the 2.25 millimeter Hermspringer prong collar. They are a fantastic tool. When the dog starts to understand the tool, we're holding the leash between two fingers and we're moving the dog, even a dog who likes to pull. But that's a technique thing, and sometimes different dogs require a little bit different input on that. So that's something that we're definitely going to be working on in class for you when you come in. We could do that in a virtual lesson if you're interested in watching how you're moving with the leash and your dog. Another good tip about that is make a lot of right turns if your dog's on the left. Okay, if you're walking your dog on the right, make a lot of left turns. Leashes can't push, but if you make a right turn and don't do it in a big sweeping arc, make a 90-degree right turn away from your dog with a loose leash and encourage them to come along. Treat it like a game. Like imagine you're playing tag and your dog's not trying to tag you necessarily. They're trying to tag the square next to you that their front feet should land in when they're in good position. And when they do, you tell them that they've won by telling them good dog or marking yes and giving them food. Okay? We practice that a lot with our dogs so that they feel like there's a spot here that starts the fun. And if they get in that spot with their front feet and line their rear end up parallel with the way we're facing, then the fun starts. And so that is another very positive way. You make a right turn when you hold the target so your dog knows where to look. You get them in that spot in the beginning, mark yes and reward, and then you can start to fade over time, fade that target away. They find the spot they're supposed to stand, they look up at you, they get a yes, and the fun starts. Okay, so when I say fun, I mean not just shoving food in your dog's mouth, I mean an event, a game begins, and then they start to think of healing itself as a game. It has value in itself because we've created value transfer to that position. This is really how we train all of our obedience positions, is we create value in those things by giving our dog good things.
And like Jason was saying, it's not just putting food in their mouth. For a dog like Chikira, we pull out the tug and we play tug of war. And
Tug.
yeah, for younger dogs, like you'll see in the video that will be shared tonight on YouTube, and we'll post it here on this page for you to watch, we're just using food, and we have this big chasing game where we mark yes, and then the dog's chasing us to get 5 to 10 pieces of food. And that movement combined with the reward of the food is really reinforcing, and the dog thrives off of it, and then they'll throw themselves back into a stationary behavior because they're so just waiting and amped and on spot to see when's the next game gonna start.
Yeah, so the video Kim's talking about has a little 7-month-old Bernedoodle, miniature Bernedoodle, who's here with us right now. It's really fun to watch, and it goes from really the very beginning of his work through day 3. You said day 4 in the video,
no,
but
it's day 4.
Well,
promise.
Agree to disagree. Because it was the next day after it was day 2.
It was 3.5 days.
Okay, well, several days. Goes over several days.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah, I made the video, so it says what it says. You'll see.
Uh-oh, you're gonna get
There's
in
little
trouble now.
subtitles that I feel like I'm correcting the record in the video.
You're hilarious.
Yeah. So, but 3 or 4 days, not a long time.
No.
And it starts early, like maybe on day 1 or 2. Okay, so what you're going to get as an impression from this dog of being crazy in the beginning to focusing some of that energy into the basic behaviors that we're beginning to teach, and you'll see the dog initiate those behaviors. The sit, you'll see them initiate the focus behavior, you'll see him initiate the touchpad, and I believe he jumps on the bed and looks at Kim like,
Yep.
you made this a button, start with the button, I'm pushing the button kind of a thing.
So we have another question, so we're going to move on here. We actually have a couple more.
Great.
Alexia is asking, what is the best way to start working on dog reactivity while on a walk? And I'm going to tell you not to work on it on a walk.
There you go.
We want to start at home. We want to start by building focus at home. We use a verbal marker system here at Audax, so we put specific words. We classically condition them using food, and then we use those markers to tell our dog when they're correct and when they're incorrect. And then we build focus. And we build focus by using food, we build it by using toys, and here at Audax we use the dog's name to get the focus and to put that on a cue. A lot of trainers use look or focus. You can call it whatever you want, but you've got to build that understanding that your dog looks at you. And then we start to do obedience, and we do all of this.
Sorry about the plane flying overhead if that's cutting out the sound. We'll just sit back and wait for just a second while that.
That's no fun.
Hey,
it's fun being on the Boeing path.
Yeah, we're on the Painfield flight path here, so we get the jets coming in to land literally 150 feet over the house right now, which is
It is
awesome.
really cool, but at the same time it annoys Jason.
Yeah, being able to read the stickers on the bottom of the plane is always interesting that close.
So anyways, back to reactivity. We want to start at home where there's no pressure, there's no distractions, and we have our dog in a calm state, and we can teach in that calm state. Once we have the behaviors solid and reliable at home, with no pressure, no leash pressure, no social pressure, one thing you will find when you train with us is we aren't using the leash or our hands to make our dogs do things, and we really are clear to clients that that's not allowed. We don't want to be using our hands or forcing our dog into a sit. That makes it horrible and sucky for everyone, and training should be the best time in their life, so we want to make it as fun as possible. So once we have reliable, motivational focus and obedience at home, we'll go out in an area where we can control the distance and the distraction.
With a good neutral dog. That's the other thing, is when you're out on a walk, if you're dealing with a dog that's dog reactive or human reactive,
or bikes or cars,
or bikes or cars or whatever, you know, noises, if they're reactive to things and you go out in public on a walk, you are not going to be able to precisely control the scenario and the outcome.
Absolutely.
Your dog is going to have too much control. So unfortunately, your dog having control and doing the behavior that it thinks is going to get the stress of that situation to diminish is going to reinforce the behavior your dog does. If that's look at you and calmly wait, it's going to get reinforced if the stress goes away. That means the thing that's triggering them moves away from them usually, or diminishes in intensity. Okay, the dog who was looking at them looks away is a good example. Okay, if your dog is barking, growling, aggressing, hair standing up, pulling at the leash, lunging, if all of those things are happening and that person or dog or person and dog team who's walking down the path goes, ha, never mind, I'm walking the other way, well, your dog just got reinforced for doing the things you didn't want them to do. And unfortunately, the real world does that to us. That's why dogs become reactive. They get uneasy, defensive about something. They exhibit a behavior, and then that behavior gets reinforced by the scenario. So another thing that reinforces dogs, if they go to the dog park or places like that, they act out, the other dog acts out, you get a dog fight, okay? Dog fights reinforce our dogs being reactive in that they confirm our dog's fear.
So another reason why I highly recommend not trying to work on it on walks, and I know it's hard, especially in light of our current situation, yes, to avoid taking your dog for a walk. But when you take a dog for a walk, you have a very specific trajectory and timeline, and your dog's stress continues to accumulate, and it continues to accumulate, and it continues to accumulate. And that dog is like a spring that gets loaded, and all of a sudden it just explodes. So while you might start out doing really well with your positive reinforcement and your counter conditioning, your dog's gonna hit a point where they're overstressed. And that's why working with somebody like Jason and I, who can really be an outside set of eyes to watch your dog and to teach you about the different social cues that they're giving and communication signals that they're giving that are really subtle, and how to take the pressure away at the ideal times is perfect. Most people, they go for a walk, the dog is doing great, they're doing great. By the end of the walk, they're exploding at everything. And it's just the dog's been pushed too far. It's like expecting too much of our kids when they're overstimulated. I will say a phone call is completely free. Feel free to give Jason a call. His number's on the Click Now on the Audax
Not
Facebook
right now,
page.
because my phone will ring and it'll mess up the live stream. So
But give him an hour and then call.
Yeah.
But a phone call is free. He can give you a ton of advice over the phone.
I should have set my phone to mute.
Yeah, whatever. You are welcome to do a virtual lesson with us, but I know a lot of people are conserving money right now,
Yeah.
which is really reliable and responsible to do. And so a phone call, just give him a call and he can give you a bunch of additional tips.
So along those same lines, I wanted to touch on one more thing with reactive dogs. Okay, there are definitely folks in the industry who are coming along in this regard and kind of have this, they're getting this figured out. But what we tended to see up until now, and sort of this good training is starting to blossom in the dog training industry. There's still lots of bad training out there, don't get me wrong. But in terms of bad training, okay, what you will see is two extremes. You'll see the extreme punishers where they put the e-collar or the prong collar on the dog and the dog twitches an ear and they nail that dog like it never felt a thing. And that tends to make dogs careful, okay?
And more reactive.
More reactive is definitely a possibility. Some dogs get careful enough they stop being reactive, but they don't like going on a walk because they're tiptoeing about getting that high level of e-collar stim or that high degree of prong collar correction. I do not recommend that. Think of it like this. You know, if your dog feels bad enough about the other dog or whatever the trigger is that they're reacting to bark continuously and lunge and try to make it go away, the correction that you're going to use in that sort of methodology is going to have to be either very strong or very frequent in order to accomplish a meaningful contrast between how your dog feels about the other trigger and the correction you're using. So likewise, you see the extreme the other way where people will feed the dog really good stuff, and they'll feed the dog even when it does the wrong behavior. Okay, and what we know about animal behavior is,
to the extent the dog is on a leash, the dog is on its rear feet, aggressing and barking at a person or another dog, and they're trying to shove food in its mouth while they're pulling the dog away from the situation. You're just telling your dog it's doing the right thing.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll see people feed and reinforce their dog during the bad behavior, the aggression or reactivity episode, and that, because of what we know about animal behavior, what you reward. Sorry, the neighbor dog is going off now, barking into our live stream.
We are dog
trainers. I know, but I'm sure people watching will be like, man, their dogs bark all the time. No, our dogs are over there and they're all quiet right now.
Good girl.
So the point I was trying to make is people will be feeding into the behavior that they don't want to happen. Animal behavior is such that what you reward, what you reinforce, you get more of. That trigger going away reinforces your dog because that's what they wanted. If they wanted food, I have absolutely seen people who think that they're working on reactivity and they're teaching their dog to bark and hold. Just like we would teach a protection dog. The dog barks, 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 and then they go, no, and the dog stops. Just like if I told my dog to bark and then told him to quiet, they're just doing obedience, they're just doing behavior, and then they get what they want by listening, okay? So the dog thinks that the command is the presence of the other dog, gets rewarded for having done the barking at some point, and then gets rewarded for eventually stopping when they're told to stop. And you get dogs who very mechanically bark at other dogs. They're not afraid of that dog anymore. They've learned obedience. The obedience is to bark. It follows the exact pattern how we teach sit, down, stand, come, heel. Antecedent, okay? That's the command or the stimulus from the environment. Behavior, that's the bark, or it's sit or down or whatever. And then consequence, that's the food reward, that's the other dog going away, or that's the leash correction. Okay? So that is the pattern that will teach a dog to react.
Did you cover, I was messaging.
That's okay.
Did you cover why we don't just take dogs face to face with what they don't like?
Yeah. So whenever no, I didn't. Thank you.
So I have a specific dog in mind who I know the owner is watching. So I apologize if you feel like you're being called out. It's someone I love dearly. A lot of times, and we see this a lot with vets as well, if you just go through the vet's office and everybody gives your dog a treat, your dog's going to love everybody at the vet's office. If you take your dog and you put them in the presence of a dog that they're arch enemies with, leave it.
Hey, leave her drink alone.
They're just going to get over it and they're going to love each other. That's not true. If your dog is reacting strong enough that they have their hackles up, that they are showing the different body language cues that dogs give that show fear or aggression, they don't want to make friends with that. And if we try to force them into close proximity, we end up making it worse.
Correct. So what I was going to mention was something we call thresholds.
Yes, it is a girl dog.
Sorry, the other camera had
you're good.
Quit, and I knew it was.
So one thing I want to say in regards to crating our dogs, we cover all of our crates so our dogs can't see each other. So if your dog is in a crate eating its biscuit and it sees the other dog out free and getting a biscuit, or in its crate in another space, we're building barrier frustration because one dog is behind a barrier. And that's a really good way to build reactivity and aggression.
Yeah.
But Jason, I'm going to let you take this one.
So resource guarding in general is oftentimes a genetic predisposition that a dog either has or doesn't have. Some dogs do it, and some dogs do not. The German Shepherd, if we're talking about shepherds generally, anything that has the word shepherd at the end of it, okay, or has a herding component to what it was bred for, has a higher degree of potential to exhibit this behavior. You think about how we would teach a dog with that genetic predisposition to guard the sheep, the herding aspect, or the goats or the chickens or whatever, is basically we make the dog believe that that is their property, and then we teach them to move it around to be the boss of it and to keep other things away from it, predators, 2 and 4-legged, okay? So that's the job of the herding dog. Dogs that would do this job were bred and were called herding dogs or shepherding dogs. So we have to understand that that is very likely just a genetic thing, okay? How we focus that behavior is the real key, or how we focus that
drive.
That drive, I should say. Thank you for fixing my misspeak there. How we focus that drive into a behavior that's useful rather than a behavior that's detrimental to our dog and ends up with them being put down because they bit the kids or something like that. So that's really the key, and the key to that is obedience. We understand that drive. When the dog shows us that drive, we show it a cue for behavior that we like. We get them to do that, and then if it's possible without reinforcing the bad behavior, okay, so gets a little bit more technical, but if it's possible, we reinforce when they answer that drive with the correct behavior, okay? That's a way to say what we're trying to say without going into all the detail, but the idea is, okay, let's say my dog wants to guard the water dish. Okay, so I know that drive is present. The other dog is who they're trying to guard it from. I need to, the correct behavior would be not fighting with the other dog. And what I usually will do is I'll inject a new behavior cue into that string. So we have dog wants water, dog wants to guard the water dish from the other dog. Something that's incompatible, like holding a sit, is oftentimes something that I'll have a dog do. The water will go down in front of them and they'll try and dive into it. No. Sit, back in the sit. She does this thing because she thinks the water's free sometimes. We put the dish down. The other dog is not present at that point or not able to just jump in the water. We aren't going to set our dog up with the problem to have it be amplified and reinforced by the other dog stealing the water. That is not the answer. It's never the answer when you're dealing with a resource guarding dog to go take their stuff as a show of dominance. We're not going to try and Caesar Milan these dogs. We're not going to flip them on their back and hold them down until they go fight or flight and blow up at us. That is the wrong answer. It will almost always, at the very least, damage your relationship, but it very well could reinforce the bad behavior.
To simplify it a bit, management, which is hard when you have 4 dogs in the house. We have 5, so we understand. But management of the dog. The other thing to think about is she's 10 months old. She probably hasn't been spayed yet. If you can wait until 12 months, wait until 12 months to spay her, but she's coming into sexual maturity, and so she's feeling out and testing out what she can get away with as her hormones are surging. So that's a consideration to know about. Spaying will definitely help with that. It won't remove resource guarding, that's genetic, 9. But it will deal with the flow of the hormones.
And one other thing we a lot of times see around this age that your dog is at, 9
periods.
to 12 months, fear periods is potential. Another thing and that's a whole other discussion we can talk about if someone wants us to dive into that, but another thing that we oftentimes see around this dawn of sexual maturity of the young dog in a multi-dog household with dogs of different ages is
different temperaments.
And different temperaments.
Said one is a softer natured dog.
But what we oftentimes see is this sort of our young dog is coming into its adult size. It's starting to get its adult sex hormones and maturity, and there's oftentimes a flip of the power hierarchy between the dogs. We cannot jump in the middle of that and try and make our older dog the dominant dog and our younger dog submissive. It won't work. It'll almost always backfire. What we can do is create rules.
Rules and boundaries.
Rules and boundaries, yes.
So I would suggest putting their crates in separate places where they cannot see each other, smell each other, hear each other. I would suggest having the dog that's exhibiting the resource guarding on a leash in the house as much as possible.
Management.
And again, you have to be careful because the rules have to be fair. So all of the dogs really, to be fair, would need to be managed. What we try to do is we have one dog who went through a fear period and really struggled. She doesn't love other dogs. She'll work around other dogs. She'll ignore other dogs, but she doesn't love other dogs. So when she comes in the house, she has her bed. She's perfectly happy on her bed. This one will be on a bed 2 feet from her. She's perfectly fine, just ignores her. So that's what we build with our dogs. And again, like Jason was saying, don't try and take things away from your dogs, because that will just make the resource guarding stronger. I know Alyssa had another question about jumping. How do we deal with jumping? Back up here really quick, and if I can find it. There we go.
So
when he's excited.
One answer will be, watch the video that we're going to drop tonight with Ozzy. That dog's a jumper.
He's insane. But I will say, so again, it goes back to on-leash management, using tools that aren't going to build pulling, because if you have him on a harness and you try to pull back on the harness with it clipped right back here, he's just going to go, oh yeah, and he gets more gratification out of it. And then, so appropriate tools, having him on a leash, and then what sort of reinforcement is he getting from the person he's jumping on? Most people, when a dog jumps on them, they come over the dog, they put their hands on the dog, they try and push the dog down, and it's just like our kids, negative attention is still attention. We're just reinforcing the bad behavior that we don't want. So we ask people not to touch the dog until he's sitting and calm and well behaved. Then they do a lot better. People can use their knee not to kick the dog or hurt the dog, but just to create a springboard that's not comfortable.
Think about on that one like this. Okay, if the dog is jumping and pawing towards the person, if the knee comes in between and stops the dog from getting purchased with their paws, it stops being fun. It's a good method of non-reinforcement. Ozzy doesn't work because his legs are so short.
He's tiny.
He just hits your leg. You can't get your leg in between his legs.
Now that said, JJ, who's a Doberman who's with us, he's what, 125 pounds?
He's big. He's a big boy.
He likes to jump, and he likes to wrap his legs around you when he jumps on you.
And then guess what happens right after that?
We don't need to go there, thanks. His verbal markers are so clearly conditioned when he does that. I tell him no, and my tone of voice matches my demeanor, and he immediately stops. There's no correction, nothing. It's just no. But it has to be an understanding between you and your dog, and he has to really respect that what you're saying has value.
Well, another thing about JJ, he's a very social and socially sensitive dog.
He is.
So when you put social pressure behind that no, he knocks it off, and he acts like, oh man, I messed up. Okay, that's not every dog. Some dogs don't feel that. So what I always ask when someone brings up a bad behavior that their dog is doing, we ask, what's the dog getting out of it? What do they think they're getting out of it in terms of why they're doing it? And then at the same time, how do we non-reinforce so we don't give it what it wants? And how do we give it something to do that we can reinforce that we want? And what you're going to see, this video that we shot just over the last couple of days with Ozzy, goes through, the dog jumps nonstop, jumps, because he didn't know what else to do. Okay, so he's trying to engage, and when it doesn't work, then he goes, okay, forget it, I go over here, and then you go, no, come back, and he comes over and he jumps. Okay, so what we tend to do is we start to work obedience, show him what works to get to interact with us, to get the rewards that we're offering. And once the dog understands how to access the rewards and the interaction with us by doing the stuff we want, if we're also non-reinforcing the stuff we don't want, they quit doing it because it doesn't work. Something really, really important about training dogs is they do what works. They stop doing what stops working, and they can actually, so there's a problem people get where they've paid the dog to sit a whole bunch, and then they go, well, the dog knows how to sit, I'll just tell him sit and stop paying him. And unfortunately what happens is the dog stops sitting because it stopped working.
Stops getting anything.
It stops getting anything out of it. So what is really important is you don't non-reinforce the stuff you want because your dog already knows it, but you non-reinforce the stuff you don't want. And when it stops working, your dog will get a grudge against jumping on you because it never works anymore. Just like if you stop paying sit, they'd stop sitting because you never pay me for sitting anymore. We want to keep paying them on a good reward schedule for doing the things we want them to do and not pay them for the things that we don't want them to do.
I actually caught myself doing this with Ozzy in our session yesterday. I was doing bed and sit, and I would tell him bed, he'd jump on the bed, and then I'd tell him to sit, and he'd sit, and I'd mark and I'd reward the first couple of times, but he was breaking the behavior, and we have a rule: when they break a behavior, we put them back in the behavior, and we don't pay them until they've held it for a second, because we don't want them to think that breaking the behavior gets a reward. Well, I told him bed and sit like 3 different times, and he wasn't staying in it long enough to get an actual reward. So 3 different times with bed and with sit, he didn't get rewarded.
Sure.
And it clicked in my head all of a sudden. I needed to change what we were working on, because I'm now non-reinforcing the behaviors that he is rocking so well. So we really have to analyze our own skills and our own system we're using with our dog. A lot of times we are layering multiple commands together, like bed and down, or heel and sit. Shakira's got her foot caught in the tug toy.
House.
And so we really want to make sure that if we're randomizing our reward schedule, our dog still gets rewarded for good things. Shakira's in the house hanging out with us all the time, and so when she's on her bed, which she does a lot, I save specific treats for her so that I can reinforce her being on the bed. She knows what it is. She's a rock star at it, and she truly doesn't need anything, but I also want her to continue to love it for her whole life. So I'm constantly, just throughout the day, good girl, and I toss her a treat, or I toss her some leftover scrambled eggs, because I want her to find value.
Eggs?
Scrambled eggs? Steak?
Good girl. I hope that makes sense. Do you have any more questions?
Ooh, Maria and Piper are here. Hi, Maria.
Awesome.
Hi, Piper. So we have a question from Murphy, the GSD. He goes crazy when we get the vacuum or the broom out. We don't even have to turn the vacuum on, and he's biting it. The mere sound of the broom makes him run into the room and attack it, barking. What can we do to alter this behavior?
Well, when you come through both our basic class and our puppy obedience foundation series, we talk about this a lot. This is something we're actually very, very into, is how to create environmental cues for our dogs, so that stuff in the environment that might freak them out actually means to do a behavior.
Or for Murphy, it's triggering his prey drive.
Triggering prey drive, and very well could be triggering defensive drive if he hates the noise.
That's true.
So one of the things that's important is changing the way he feels about that thing and its presence. So one of the things we do, again, talking about thresholds, if we're dealing with prey drive or defensive drive, there are thresholds that the dog can tolerate a certain level of the stimulation. For Shakira, that was me putting the toy down. She's like, but now it's mine. No, it's not. Okay, so this is a good example. There's a thing on the side of my chair that she really wants, and that's triggering her possession drive more than anything else. So in the presence of that thing, but below their threshold for reacting, that might mean the vacuum is at the other end of a long space or room, and we work the obedience for reward.
On a leash,
on a
collar.
Managed. We show them the stimulus triggers reward events with us when they obey. This is the same for a lot of different behavioral problems.
If he's got good food drive, grab his breakfast or his dinner or both, put it in a Ziploc, put it in the bowl, shake the bowl, put it on the counter, have one person pick up the broom a couple rooms away, but where he can still see it, or at the other end of the house and sweeping where he's going to be able to hear it, but he's on a leash with you.
Yes.
So it's a two-person event.
Don't do that on the live stream. House. Plats.
She says I've been controlling myself for so long. Wow.
Oh.
No COVID puppies here, thanks. Anyways, back on track. So start at a distance, make it a 2-team event. Start as far away as you have to, so that he has to be able to stay below his threshold and be able to focus on you. use rewards when he does the right thing. Have him sit, have him down. A lot of times we'll go outside and work at an even greater distance with a fine rake, because that's very similar to a broom, and then slowly shrink the distance. But just like when you're working on reactivity on a walk, stress builds, it's cumulative, and if you continue to build and continue to build, they're going to explode. Work for 1 to 2 minutes and be done. Put him away and come back to it a day or two later or a few hours later. But give him a chance to decompress first. Take a nap, sleep it off, because we don't want to work them so long and so hard that they blow up and all of our work was just undone.
So another thing to think about is when we talk about changing the way our dog feels about the presence of something. The process there is called counter conditioning. It's not the only answer, okay? We just talked about the obedience side of it. The counter conditioning side is a lot of times we use noises because noises work really well with this. So the vacuum makes a specific noise, and we even, when we counter condition our dogs to noise, we classify the types of noises that we're going to be working on in any session, like a high-pitched motor noise, vacuum, weed whacker, any of that kind of stuff. That's a group. Then we have low pitch sort of continuous noises like diesel tractors and stuff like that. We have one of those. We have banging noises, so you see our noisy pool that we use. You'll see it in a lot of videos. If you haven't been out to our classes, but we use it in our group classes when we're here. It's not something we can usually truck around with us to privates and stuff, but I need to get a noisy bag, I think.
Ooh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, I need to make
Very
a
creative.
big canvas bag full of the same stuff that's in our noisy pool.
So I have a new question when you're ready.
Yeah, but the idea, and then we use whip cracks to simulate things like gunfire and fireworks, but at a significant distance from our dog. And we create those sounds. So flip the vacuum cleaner on for just a second in the other room, dog's on a leash, and don't worry about his behavior, pay. So you flip the vacuum on, flip it back off. This is a team sport, by the way. And then immediately put the food in the dog's mouth. Good food, by the way, not just their kibble. Up the value when you do this. And repeat. Vacuum on, vacuum off, feed. Vacuum on, vacuum off, feed.
For the noise, I totally agree. For a dog like Murphy, where he's reacting to
the visual,
just the presence and the visual, I would do what Jason's describing as classical conditioning. I would do more operant conditioning where you're using obedience commands and tying the food reward into it.
Yeah, that it sounds more like
there's different types.
There's different reasons dogs do this. It sounds like yours is fitting into more what Kim is talking about for sure. But yeah, those are different approaches to similar behaviors the dogs do, but the reason that they do them is sometimes different.
Absolutely. So Haley Latimer has jumped on.
Awesome.
And
hey, Haley.
Good to see you, Haley. We've tried the new prong collar with Luna, and she is just depressed on it. She doesn't perform tasks at all. We take the prong collar off and go back to the star mark collar, and she's perfect. Should we stop using the prong collar?
I would not, but understanding why she's doing that is important. And this isn't a big uncommon problem. A lot of people face this. The reason that you're on the prong collar is important. The star mark is not giving the message to not pull, and it's not giving the message when she exhibits really bad behavior that she should stop. So making sure that the new prong collar is fitted really well, and it's probably a little bit tight if she just put it on and she absolutely quits.
Could I have that tug toy?
Yeah.
So I would also take a step back for a minute. Shakira.
Here you go. Kim's gonna give you something practical.
She normally doesn't do this for me. Yes.
Put the toy away. Okay. So here's the thing. The visual of the toy is messing Shakira's game up here. The game here is put the e-collar on, or the prong collar. You don't put the prong collar over their head. But we get the collar on, and then something fun happens. Not a correction. You know, if I put that collar on, or the prong collar on, and then the first thing she experienced with that was an immediate correction, she'd be like, oh, this thing, it means I should shut down and be super careful because I can't avoid correction. So how your dog perceives a piece of
Good.
equipment can be changed by what happens right afterwards.
Yes. Yes.
Taco.
Thanks.
When
We
you-
know whose dog it is.
So no, the issue there was she threw the toy away and told Shakira yes. Well, Shakira's understanding of yes has come to the person who
House.
says it for reward, but
Nope.
the reward was
Pet.
remote. So she needed to give her
Pet.
release that says she can go. She could have told her in German, she could have told her free, she could have told her okay, or she could have told her to go bite it, or to bring it back. Any of those things would have worked, but yes was a conflict.
Well,
Like,
and that's why she's your dog. She's definitely your dog, and you are the one that
Thanks.
works her more. So I didn't know that.
Yep.
Good girl.
But those are definitely things that we talk about. So the
Can you make that
idea
email?
with how Kim put the collar on, the toy was out of sight because Shakira was just fixated on it. She put the collar on. Shakira actually, when you hold any collar, because we've practiced this a bunch, she'll launch her head through it. When you tell her to. You hold it out, do it.
Hey,
She
Pastor
goes-
Fred.
She goes right through it. And so the idea there is what happens right after that collar gets put on is the thing that shapes how they feel about the collar. So you can imagine if I put that collar on and then zapped her with the e-collar remote, she'd be like, I don't want that thing on. You see dogs, doing this kind
They
of try to
avoid.
avoid. You see that with the prong collar, you're trying to put it on and they're trying to wiggle to get away. She's become the opposite because what happens when, if you say you go for a walk and you put your dog's collar on it before you go for a walk and your dog loves to go for walks, the dog starts to bring you the leash and collar. We were working with a client not too long ago and the dog brings them the leash, brings them the collar, pulls their coats off the coat hook and brings them their coats because they know what those things represent, which is to get to go out and do the fun stuff.
That's right.
So we actually, for competition dogs, we condition a similar thing with the fur saver collar, which is the only kind of collar that you can wear in a Schutzen trial. And so we put the collar on, and then we start the game. Okay, we play tug, or we have them do one obedience, and then it's on.
And you can even start with just food.
Yep,
And in our
absolutely,
puppy
use the
class,
food.
we work on this a lot where we touch the dog's flat collar and we give him a piece of food. We touch the dog's prong collar, we give him a piece of food. And we're constantly teaching the dog as we take collars on and off of them, they get rewarded. And then we increase the value and the intensity, whether that's a walk or a tug session, playing fetch, whatever your dog loves. The learner chooses what's rewarding. Your dog has something that motivates them and capitalize on it. One thing with the prong collar, make sure you're sliding your fingers under and you can get your fingers under those prongs so it's not too tight. I'd probably just put it on her and feed her and then let her wear it for a little bit and get comfortable wearing it so it means nothing. And also really consider using a lightweight leash so that a dog as sensitive as Luna isn't feeling any pressure just from the leash even hanging on it, because if a prong collar is lifted up just a tiny bit off the dog's neck, they feel that pressure and it's punishment. And so we really want to be careful in our technique and in the tools that we use. So a lightweight leash, a lightweight clip onto the prong collar, and getting her used to it first.
Great advice. So along the same lines, I was just thinking about, just like Kim had said, don't clip the leash on. Play some of her favorite games right after you put it on. If she shuts down, kind of let her. Don't worry about.
Don't put it on her and try to go out
Yeah.
and do a bunch of work until she loves it.
Yeah, don't create the same prediction by putting the leash on immediately after you put the collar on and making it so the first thing she feels is the prong collar. Put it on, let her be with no leash on the collar for a while. Play with her in the house in that state. And then when you put the collar on, spend some time in a low stress environment like inside, working on some of the, I don't know if you were on toward the beginning of the live stream where we talked about leash pressure teaching. You can do that same exact exercise that we talked about in the beginning of this. If you weren't here when it started, go back after the stream, after it reposts, and watch the beginning where we talk about the exercise for teaching the dog how to understand leash pressure. It's the same on whatever equipment. It's just less effort is required on the prong collar for them to kind of get the message. But the idea is you put a little pull on that collar, and when they move towards it, you mark them and reward that they did the right thing.
My phone is dead.
Uh-oh, Kim's battery died. Do you have a cable?
No.
Okay, because you can plug into the battery backup on the other phone. Or you can stand over there so you can read the questions.
Ooh, Pastor Fred says he loves this. Since moving out to the country, our dog goes crazy when someone comes to the door. Any advice to get her to stop? Well, first, go back and watch the part about techniques and tools, because you need to adjust your tools. You need to schedule your private session with us that you already have. And Jason, what else do you have to say?
So there are a ton of videos on our Facebook feed, if you scroll back, which deal with the doorbell and how we create environmental cues for behaviors that we want.
You can use both a doorbell or just knocking on the door. But again, with everything, start where 9.
It's gonna dump your drink.
Yeah, it's empty. Oh. Start with neutral, basic obedience. So teach her a down command, teach her a bed command, then teach her to do a down on the bed. And then we create a progression where we have our kids ring the doorbell or knock on the door. And as soon as that noise happens, ding dong, we go bed.
Bed command.
And then the dog runs to the bed and they get rewarded. Or someone knocks at the door, bed, and they run and find their bed and lay down and they get rewarded. And our dogs have learned that they don't get pet by people who walk in the door unless they run and find their bed first. So it was great. We had a male dog. Every time he heard the doorbell, he'd run and lay down because he loved to be pet. You just don't care.
She doesn't care that much.
She says, Jason, all I want is Jason. Yeah. Or whoever has
the tug toy or the sleeve. So go back though and watch. There's a video with a dog named Sunny, who is a little golden retriever puppy, super cute.
I'll tag you in it, Pastor Fred.
Yeah. Watch that one. There's another one with Bonnie, who's another golden golden retriever. I can't remember.
She's a lab.
Lab. There is
I think there's one with Laurel, the Airedale Terrier, as well.
There might be. And I have more of those videos. We do this with all the dogs that stay with us for a long board and train. We work on this skill. And I have another one with a dog named Aza, German Shepherd, who it's a really fun video. But she learns the pattern so well that, like, she starts to jump onto the bed when we're not paying attention, basically. Like, make Meg, who worked for us, make Meg come back in because she loved Meg so much. So she figured out like an offered behavior that would make that sort of scenario play out the way she wanted to. So that's
what do you mean by an offered behavior?
So offering a behavior, we've talked about a little bit, giving the dog something to do that has value to us so that they have something to do that gets them what they want.
So how often do you give your dog a command? It might be something newer to them, or your dog is just free in front of you and they start to cycle through things. A lot of times I see it when someone is teaching their dog something new and instead of laying down they sit, or they try sit and down and come instead of heel, because they're trying to figure out what you want them to do. They're thinking for themselves, and we love this skill, and that's what he's talking about with Aza. She learned that the bed produced rewards. It produced Meg, who gave her great attention. It produced food rewards, and so she'd go over and she'd jump on the bed and, as we say, pound the bed to try and get what she wanted. And those are the sort of demand behaviors we like at Audax. We love this focused stare. That's an acceptable demand behavior. My dogs don't paw at me. They don't jump on me. I try to get them to, and they still won't.
Yeah, they just don't love us.
They love us. They just know not to jump on us. Obedience behaviors are good demand behaviors. Barking at us, jumping on us, those are not.
Yeah. So
I see that look.
Another thing to think about is what's the reason that your dog is barking? Okay, is it excitement, or is it defensiveness, or some other drive that your dog is exhibiting? And that has to do with, we talked through this a minute ago with someone's question about resource guarding, is, okay, what's the drive, how do we focus that drive when there's a trigger into a behavior that we like versus one we don't like? And that's the real trick to dog training, is how do we get what's going on in their head, how do we get that to create the behavior that we want instead of the stuff we don't? And that is always a matter of, without that thing present, teach them the thing we want them to do, and then make that thing that they don't like, or the thing that they like so much they can't obey, we make that thing trigger this behavior through the normal sequence of teaching commands, and then we reward it just like they did it when we haven't told them to. Okay, so they go to their bed because we told them bed a bunch of times, and then we put it in sequence where the new thing that happens, the old command happens, the behavior happens, the reward happens, and pretty soon they beat us to the punch. They do the behavior that we've done when the new thing in the environment happens, and we haven't even said to do it. And that's the key to creating environmental cueing. We do it all the time around household stuff. We do it with when we do protection dog work. We do it a lot where we make the dog understand the behavior of the helper means they can do certain things like bite, and those behaviors that the helper does are specific threat behaviors. A lot of what we do in terms of teaching pet dogs comes from our understanding of how to teach protection dogs to do protection stuff, because those are the kinds of things that the dog has to do sort of on its own without help, without being right on the leash sometimes. And so understanding how that process works really helps to inform us how we teach dogs to do good stuff and be off leash and be able to function alone. Not all of those behaviors we want to happen are biting, of course. That's a very specific skill, but that idea translates beyond protection work to just general dog training, when you understand how to create cues from things that happen, not just things we say.
Yep. So Leia Martz has jumped on, and she has a couple questions.
Awesome. Hey, Leia.
One is specific to good leash walking, and we talked a lot about that in the beginning. So once we finish this live feed up, go back and watch the first half of the video, and there's some really good tips there. And then the second is, when her husband comes into the kitchen, her puppy gets really excited and leaves a little puddle on the floor. So how to handle that? And my first question is he just getting home? Because a lot of times when our dogs first see us when we get home, they're really excited, and puppies have little bladders. They can't hold it very long. So if he's just arriving home, I would have him greet the puppy outside so that mess happens outside.
Yeah. So if you remember when I first met your puppy, he leaked a little bit too. So it's not just your husband. It might be more men than women. I don't know. But he was excited when he met me.
And a lot of it's just bladder control that will develop.
Okay, and thankfully we were outside when that happened, but that's super normal for puppies. And whenever we deal with potty issues with young dogs, with any dog, don't make a big deal of it. Ignore it. It'll
what I was thinking.
Almost always go away if we completely ignore it. Now, ignoring it also means don't reward it. Okay, so if the immediate thing is pee, and then we start petting the dog, if that dog wanted petting, are we rewarding the immediate? Is the immediate
could the dog
outcome?
Perceive that petting as a reward for piddling? We don't want that to be created.
Again, dogs do what works. So if pottying works to get him attention, it could create the problem. But bad attention could create more pottying.
So a couple of things I want you to think about. One, try and be outside when he greets your husband. If it's just your husband walking into the kitchen and your puppy gets excited and pees, move your puppy away from it, clean up the mess, and ignore it. But I would challenge you to have a conversation with your spouse and ask him to ignore the puppy when he first comes in. Once the puppy settles down, then have your husband pet the dog, and by that time it shouldn't be a big deal and it's less likely to happen. Also consider body language. If guys are big and strong and tall, and a lot of times that can be intimidating to a dog. So if we're coming over our dog like this, a lot of dogs are really uncomfortable with that, and that's going to make a little puppy pee. So
we call that submissive peeing for a reason.
Yep, if we come like this, it's a lot less stressful, and our dog doesn't feel like we're trying to dominate or alpha them,
Yeah.
which are not healthy.
Yeah. So coming over the top to a dog who's already submissive peeing, meaning when we lean over them, that is going to very likely trigger that behavior. If it's just submissive peeing, if it's just leaking because their bladder was full and they're excited, that doesn't have to be submissive. It can just be a bladder control thing because they're young, and your dog is very young. The same is true with accidents in the house. You know, if your puppy like fully pees, doesn't just like have a little leak when something exciting happens, but fully pees right in the middle of the house, we can absolutely create that problem by getting mad at the dog and socially pressuring them. What tends to happen in that case is they go hide and do it, so you'll end up with a corner of the house where you're not usually in visual contact becomes the dog's pee spot. Defecating can be the same problem. And then the opposite can happen too, where we go out and we train our dog to potty in a certain spot. This is something we really focus on when we work our dogs is we have a routine where we get up in the morning, dogs go outside, leash, go to the spot. We cue them to potty just like it's any other obedience command because we know they have to. They know they're going to do it. We wait, they pee, and we go, good, and then we go about our day. We don't make a big deal of it there either. We just use their condition reinforcer, good, one time. We don't put a whole bunch of social praise into it. It's just, oh, that was the right thing.
And there is no food reward for going potty. The
Never.
reward of emptying their bladder is reward enough. A lot of dogs will learn if you give them treats for going potty outside. They'll go sit at the sliding glass door. They'll wait till you take them out. They'll go outside. They'll pretend to potty and they'll come back. Okay, where's my treat?
Get the treat. Or you're sitting at your computer working, or you're in the kitchen washing the dishes or cooking dinner or whatever, and they come right up to you, look at you, and drop a potty right there like, aren't I good? Don't I deserve some of that food you're cooking?
Puppies are like that.
Puppies, but that can absolutely be that we rewarded them for doing it, and they didn't make an association to the place we were at. They made an association to the strongest thing, which was they pottied. Okay, so that's pretty normal for dogs. Is they're going to make the association to the thing that happened the soonest, or the simultaneously to the reward, and they're going to make the association to the strongest stimulus or input that they got. So we talk about this with overshadowing verbal commands, where we try not to move while we talk when we're teaching the verbal commands. We put those things in series, because if we make a stronger thing like a movement happen over when we talk, the dog only perceives the movement. Well, to them, pottying was the strongest thing that happened. So
it's also why we don't ask our
background
dogs,
might not have been all that
do you
strong.
need to go potty?
It's
we
not
don't
a
ask
question
them
we'll
that.
ever ask
we
our
wait until
dog.
we're outside and then we say potty.
Yeah, because you use that. If you follow us and you go, okay, we go outside, we say potty, they do the potty. Well, if you said, do you need to potty? They don't know what "do you need to" really means. I mean,
some do, but most
very
don't.
few. Some might, but they hear the word potty, which we've used outside when they potty, and they're like, okay, and they're starting up the process. So
especially young dogs.
yeah. So we try to only use that word when we're at the spot. It's the potty spot that we want them to go, and we make that the place they go. Through repetition over and over and over, they start to realize we don't do that in the house. We run clocks when we have young dogs when we're potty training them, because it's a very frequent out to the potty spot routine.
And it's every time they wake up, it's every time they start to get fidgety and they can't hold a behavior anymore. And we keep our dogs on a leash in the house unless they've earned the freedom. So when they're young, they're always on a leash. And then we take them out to that potty spot on a leash so that they learn it's this specific area. And then we can send our dogs out at this age, just tell her, okay, go potty. And she goes and takes care of her business and comes running back.
Yep. You want to check if there's any other questions
Sure.
going on? Sorry, our monitor phone crashed, or battery died, so we got to jump up to the phone on the tripod here.
Craig Evans jumped on and said he's really enjoying the live feed.
Oh, awesome.
Our last session with you has helped us and Greta a lot.
Oh, thank you, Craig. We watched the video you sent, and I couldn't download it off the Google Photos thing, but I'd love to be able to share that on our Facebook page. It's a great example of the level of work that you're experiencing with Greta, it's a great example of what we try to accomplish, and we're just pleased to see that. I did notice a couple things in the video that you sent us over that we could work on if you're interested, and I shot you back a message and mentioned that. Did you have another one, Kim?
Nope.
Nope. I think we're about to wrap up, unless we have any more questions. Hope all you guys are doing great. Stay safe out there. We're all just trying to do our part, and we'll try and do some more of these. Again, we're going to be dropping another video tonight. Watch for that. It's got Ozzy, the Bernedoodle puppy, in it, and that's a really fun little video. You get to see my wife a whole bunch in that, because he's short and I'm tall, so she's doing a lot of the work with that dog. But super fun dog, and we'll catch you guys on our next feed, or give us a ring if you have more detailed questions.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks a lot.